Welcome to the Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway podcast, where you will hear transformational stories, positive encouragement, and practical strategies to help you grow your mindset, reach your potential, live your dreams, and experience a purpose-driven, impact-filled life. Here's your host, Alan Blaine.
All right, this is Alan Blaine, and I am fired up to interview our special guest today, Brian Roth. Now, let me tell you just a little bit about Brian before we jump into this conversation. After graduating from Taylor University with a degree in physics, Brian joined the United States Navy, serving as a nuclear-trained officer on board 3 different submarines. Brian served in the Navy for 22 years, 12 years active duty, 10 years in the reserves. And after leaving active duty, Brian held several positions with different power generation companies and is currently the Vice President of Operations and Maintenance for PROENERGY Services. In 2018, Brian formed Employment to Deployment, a leadership consulting company that conducted leadership and team building seminars, coached executives, and facilitated strategic planning. In 2020, Brian attempted to gain ballot access to run for governor of Indiana. Although he was unsuccessful, it was a tremendous learning experience. Brian is a published author of the leadership book called Climbing Down: How Leaders Descend to Their Destiny. Brian has been married to Charisse for 36 years, and they have 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren. Brian, welcome to the Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway podcast. You ready for this?
I am. Thanks, Alan. It's great to be with you.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and I'm glad our mutual friend John Hans introduced us, and glad to have you on the show. So I gave our listeners just a brief overview of kind of who you are and some of your backstory, but can you just kind of elaborate on that and let everyone know kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So, small town, kind of grew up in Mayberry. That dates me because that's an Andy Griffith show, but, never locked your house, never locked your cars, rode my bicycle to kindergarten, kind of living. Taylor University was there, small Christian college. My teachers in school, most of them were graduates from Taylor. So I lived in this kind of Christian utopia, accepted the Lord when I was young. But really, the Lord was my 911 operator. If I got in trouble, I'd bring him up, right? Wasn't really that personal relationship. That matters here in a minute. Graduated from Taylor, joined the Navy, had no idea what I was getting into, didn't have anybody in my family that I even knew was in the military. But it seemed like a good opportunity. Submarines seemed kind of cool. So joined the submarine force. We had 1 child at that point. We had another one while I was in training. And then the third one, I got to my first submarine. So 3 kids. My wife accepted the Lord later. She was about 18 when she accepted the Lord. And then I got into the Navy, 140 guys on a submarine for 3 months. You can figure it out. Your listeners can figure it out, kind of a cesspool. And I got really angry at God. My wife was growing like crazy. She's on fire for the Lord. Here I am. I've been a Christian 15, 16 years, and the Lord put me in this cesspool. I was angry at God, like angry at God. And it took me till I was about 29 before God got a big enough stick to get through my thick head and my hard heart. And I came back. And when I did, I really kind of found, the Lord's Prayer is something that I thought I got to investigate, right? Where it says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This kingdom concept, what does it mean to have this kingdom? What's it look like to have that on earth, right? And so I really started kind of digging into that. Along with that, I really dug into leadership. I assumed that a captain of a ballistic missile submarine carrying 24 ballistic missiles would be a good leader. And I found out probably wasn't the case, right? Or I didn't understand leadership. So I had a passion for leadership. I had a passion for the kingdom. And that kind of drove me most of my adult life. I became very kind of sensitive to the call of God, even though I didn't know kind of what it meant. I didn't worry about it, right? I kind of just lived this reckless, abandoned life in some respects. And part of that comes from when I was a sophomore in high school, the JV basketball coach said, "You going out for basketball?" I played football, basketball, baseball up to that point. I said, "Yeah, coach, I was planning on it." And he said, just like this, I'm not making this up. He said, "Ooh, I'd hate to have to cut you." Well, I didn't go out. So I let one guy convince me I couldn't do something. Well, never again. I've lived my entire life now with this drive to never let one guy tell me I can't do something. So I was driving home one day from work in 2015, and very clearly the Lord said, "You need to move back to Indiana and run for governor." politics had always been something that I was interested in. I'd never run for politics. So here I'm going to run for governor, never holding a political office before. We were living in Georgia. We just bought a house 15 months before, and we were heading back to Indiana. When I got to Indiana, I was sleeping at my parents' house. I woke up 2 a.m. with this word that said, you need to go read the Indiana State Constitution. Only God could put that in your head because nobody else would read the Indiana State Constitution. And it said you had to be a resident of Indiana the 5 years preceding the election. This was August of 2015. That means I had to be a resident before November of 2015. We had bought a house 15 months earlier in Georgia. So we were just all in, right? House sold the day we put it on the market, moved back, became a resident. I had to call my boss and say, this was kind of before COVID and where working remotely was in vogue. I had to call my boss and say, I need to work remote because I got to go run for governor. I have to be in Indiana. He said, let me think about it. I said, I'd like to keep working, but I'll have to quit if you say no. And of course he said yes, so I kept working. So it's just kind of that's how we kind of have lived. And I married a fantastic woman that lets me do this. She lets me kind of recklessly, in some people's mind, just go about things, right? And
I can relate.
Yeah, we started employment to deployment. Again, strange name. It's employment, the number 2 deployment. We started that in 2018. Employment is it's a job. It's actually the value somebody else places on your ability. They say, for your skill set, I'll pay you this much money. We should have a job. It's important. We should have employment. A deployment's a mission. It's a purpose. It's a military term. It's the reason you exist on planet Earth. And the number 2 either means unity, the 2 shall become 1, or it means separation in the case of the word division or division, 2 visions. So most people think employment and deployment are separate and distinct. I do this thing for 40 years, I retire, and maybe I do this. I don't believe that. I believe you can work these 2 things closer together, and you can have your employment and deployment really lay on top of each other, where you can get up every day, and you can get paid for doing what it is God created you to do. So that's really why we started the business, in large part because I think leadership is one of the missing components for most people. And we can talk a little bit more about that. And then so I started that in 2018. This is where these fantastic entrepreneurs you have on the show, this is where I fall out a little bit. I started the business in May of 2018, and then I stopped it in September of 2019 because I had to run for governor, right? I had to try to get on the ballot. So after running the business for a little over a year, we really stopped it. We worked for 6 months to get on the ballot. We had to have all our signatures turned in by February 7th. And on January 30th, my dad had a massive heart attack. They were snowbirds. They were down in Florida. You have to collect signatures and then turn them into each of the 92 counties so they can be counted. So my wife and I were traveling all over the state, turning these in. She was on the east side. I was on the west side. I called her and said, hey, Dad had a massive heart attack. They don't think he's going to make it. I said, meet me at the Indianapolis airport. We got to fly to Florida. So we flew down to Florida. God was gracious, and my dad survived the weekend. They didn't think he would. I talked to my mom and my siblings. I had to fly back to Indiana. We had to turn all the signatures in, and then got back to Florida again. My dad did recover. Then COVID hit. Nobody wants leadership training or coaching during a pandemic.
Right.
So it just decimated us financially. We had to put everything we had saved into just survival at that point. Fast forward to fall of 2022, my wise wife says, I think you're missing something, Brian. I said, honey, enlighten me. What am I missing? She said, I don't think consulting's for you. I said, thanks, babe, but what are you trying to tell me, right? I've been doing this for 4.5 years. What are you trying to tell me? You're missing something because you get to fly in, spend a little bit of time with people, and then they stop paying you and you have to leave. That's consulting, right? It's just the way it works, right? You're not getting paid. You're probably not going to spend a ton of time there. She said, I think you need to go back and work for a company so you can go a lot deeper because you want to have a true impact on people's lives. And she was right. So 2022, I kind of went back into the power industry after having worked in the power industry most of my adult life. I went back in and been here 14, 15 months, and she was spot on, right? I mean, it's not that I won't consult again. I love to speak, but I get to really impact people because I get to see them every day, right? And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the opportunity to really make a difference in people's lives. And I talk fast, but that's me. That's 57 years, almost 58 years of Brian.
Yeah. Well, and you've got a book. You've got a book that you've written too. When was that published along that timeline and journey?
Yep, we published it in 2019. It was something that I tend to, and I have a few of the books in the hopper, but I tend to use the principles and then I write them in a book, right? That's kind of what I did with this. It's an odd title. climbing down. We're conditioned to think climbing up is good. And so the inverse of that or the converse of that would be bad. So climbing down would be bad.
Right.
So what drove me? A few things drove the title. I heard leaders when I was studying leadership say it's lonely at the top. And I'm like, well, it shouldn't be lonely. Why? It shouldn't be lonely at the top, right? I mean, why? I mean, and so I thought, well, maybe they're climbing away from the people they're leading, right? Maybe they're leaving people behind and they're at the top and maybe the other people at the bottom. I studied Maxwell a lot and of course, Jim Collins, a lot of people. And I like the stages of leadership that Maxwell goes through. And I said, I think really what this thing is all about, it's really about starting at the top of this ladder and climbing down. And as you do that, you start to elevate other people up around you. In other words, you start to create other leaders. Every leader wants to create more leaders, right? So I tell people all the time, and Mark Terrell and I had this conversation a lot. If I parked a red Porsche out in front of my office here in Texas, it'd be very visible because there's lots of trucks, but no red Porsches. But if I parked that same red Porsche in an exotic car lot in Houston, I didn't change that at all. It's just a little harder to see it, right? And that's really what we want. Some leaders think visibility is what they want. They have to be the most visible. And when they do that, in general, they become the only leader in the organization. I believe you win as a leader when people look at your organization and they go, oh yeah, there's Alan, there's Brian, but they have to look to find us because we have a lot of leaders around us, right?
Yes.
And so that's kind of the concept. You climb down, it's like footing a ladder, like a fireman do, hold the bottom of the ladder so somebody else can climb. So that's the climbing down concept, right? It's really, let's climb toward the people we're leading. Let's elevate them up around us. Let's help them become better leaders. And then let's foot their ladder. Let's hang on so they can develop and they can become better leaders. So that's the concept of the title.
Brian, I love that so much. Well said. Well said. And I want to go back to something you said before I brought up your book. And that is, and I don't know if I was writing fast enough, but you said something to the effect that you believe leadership is the missing principle or piece for most people. Can you elaborate what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think if you look at humans, we are unique, but we're very much the same. And where we're the same is, I believe that we're all created to lead and manage. I deviate with some people here because I believe leadership and management are equally important, but different functions. Some people see leadership and management as two sides of the same coin, and they just apply the leadership management coin. If you do that, my view is you're going to manage more than you lead. Why? Because management's much more tangible. We learn it first, take out the trash, feed the dog, do your homework, check, 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 and I can go play. Learn as a kid. We should learn to manage as a kid, right? But we oftentimes don't really understand what leadership is. So I think for a lot of people, because God created us to both lead and to manage, some of what they're missing in becoming who it is God created them to be is this leadership piece. They don't know how to activate it. They don't have the keys to activate the leadership potential. So I spent a lot of time, and that's why I wrote the book, because it's a very tangible leadership model. It has leader on one side of the ladder and follower on the other side, right? A fundamental principle for me is leaders don't choose their followers. I get to choose my direct reports, but followers choose their leader. So I couldn't create a model that didn't have leader and follower both on it, because I can do anything I want as a leader. But if followers don't join me, then, as I think Maxwell, somebody says, I'm just out for a walk, right? So I think that's where people struggle. They just don't know how to get the leadership out. Nobody's ever helped them do that. So that's really what I try to do. I'm doing it now in the company I work for. I do it anywhere. I'll go anywhere, anytime, have any conversation when it comes to this topic, because I truly believe that's part of the reason I exist on planet Earth, is to help people find that.
I love it. I know when we were talking earlier before we recorded, you said one of the things that drives you is helping people discover the keys to unlock their full potential, their God-given potential that God's given them. Do you feel like this leadership piece is a huge part of that? Is it the part of it, or just a big part of it? How do you see the two fitting together?
Yeah, I mean, there are things in life, I think, that there's a lot of things that impact us, and occasionally there's like a step change. A step change for me was John 17:4. I probably read it a million times, but it just hit me probably 10 years ago. And it says, and this is Jesus speaking, and of course he's still alive, and he says, Father, I glorified you on earth because I completed the work you gave me to do. Glory, there's the Greek word dox, that means full weight, right? And so he's really saying that the world saw the full weight of you, Father, through me, because I functioned exactly the way you created. That, like, if that doesn't excite you, you kind of got to check your pulse a little bit, right? I mean, so I can glorify God every day. by becoming the person he created me to be. And I think part of that is who he created me to be. He said, look, I've made you a communicator. It doesn't make sense. I got a 450 on the verbal SAT when I took it in high school. That's half, right? I mean, I shouldn't be a good communicator, right? He said, you are a communicator and you're going to have to develop that, right? I think one thing we miss, and this is in, it's first or second Peter. I don't remember exactly which one, but it says that we've each been given a special gift really to serve others. But that special gift doesn't come fully developed, right? We all know this at Christmas. Some, you buy your kids a present, and it says, some assembly required, and then you spend 6 hours putting them together.
Yep.
I think what we have to do is we have to discover what it is, that unique gift, what it is that God put us here to do. We have to develop it, and then we have to deliver it, right? Discover, develop, deliver. And so that's what I try to do, help people discover what is it that you do better than anybody else and that God really put you here to go do. Let's go develop it because it doesn't come fully developed, and then let's deliver it. And I know your word for the year is no. And I love that because I think, and I'm just speculating, that what you're really saying is you're saying no to things that fall outside of your purpose, but you're going to say yes all day things that do, right? And I'm 100%. The same way. You asked me to come speak on anything around leadership. I mean, I flew to Indiana to speak at a Veterans Day event at my old high school to 700 junior high and high school kids primarily, right? Yeah. Why? Because it falls directly into my purpose. I could talk about this concept of greatness that I think I look at maybe a little different than other people do, and I could really deliver this. So I'm with you. I'll say no to anything that falls out, but I'll say yes all day long to what I think falls really inside that.
I love that, Brian. Now you got me curious. What in a nutshell causes you to view greatness so much different than most people, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead, but I know, and I listen to your podcast, so I know you ask a lot of people about success and that definition. Here's what I think, right? I think,
yeah, jump to that. Tell me if it ties into your definition of success. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I think for high achievers, which I think is a small percentage, success is a fine measure. But for most people, when they think of what's successful, they look left and right. They compare themselves to somebody else. And oftentimes it's a demotivator. In other words, they try to bring them down so they're a little bit better, right? I can find a family that's a little more dysfunctional than mine, and I have a successful family, right? I can find a company that's a little more dysfunctional than mine, and I have a successful company. So I don't love the term success. What I like is greatness. And again, I think you have to then rethink greatness because we talk a lot about the GOAT, right? The greatest of all time. Is it Tom Brady? And again, we're looking left and right when we do that. I think it's okay to look left and right, but what greatness really is not a horizontal comparison, but it's a vertical evaluation. It's really this idea of how good is Brian to the potential I have. So we define greatness as kinetic functioning, and I'm a physics guy, so you have to bear with the equations.
I love it.
Kinetic functioning over potential capacity. In other words, how much potential do I have, and how much of that has been converted to kinetic? It's no different than potential energy, stored energy, kinetic energy, energy in motion. So if I want to be great, and I do this at almost every seminar, I'll start the seminar by saying, I'm a great communicator. Then I pause, I watch people squirm, and then I go, why does that bother you? Why? And they're like, because it's arrogant and blah, blah, blah. And they say, well, you're saying you're better than somebody else. I didn't say that. I just said I was a great communicator. I'm just curious why that bothered you. It bothers them because they think I'm comparing myself to other people and I'm saying I'm better than them. I'm not. I'm saying of the potential I have to communicate, I've converted most of it, probably 85% to kinetic functioning. I can still get a little better. I work on communications all the time, but I've converted most of what God put in me to communicate to kinetic functioning. Therefore, my definition, that's great. It's not arrogant at all. I'm simply glorifying God because I'm getting a little bit closer to completing the work he gave me to do. And part of that work is to communicate primarily around leadership and team building, but it's to communicate to others.
I love that. And I keep thinking too about the parable of the talents. It's like we've all been given different gifts, talents, and abilities. And what are we doing to maximize that in our lifetime? Because to me, and I've said it before, that is my definition of success. And I love yours. I love what you shared. Agree with everything. But it's like when I get to the end of my life, and figuratively speaking, if I could look back on it, if I'm the sun setting on my life, it's like, that's what's going to define, success or not for me is, what did I do with those gifts, talents, and abilities? Did I maximize it? Did I use it? And that's exactly what you're saying in different words, probably better words than I would. I really appreciate everything you're saying.
Yeah, and I think it ties in, quite frankly, to this concept. We write about this in the book of history and legacy. History is that it's really what did I do? You could say it's the dash. It's really what I do from my birth to my death day, right? It's really very. I have a big impact on that, and history has impact.
Right.
But if Martin Luther King Jr. only did the speech that we come to know as the "I Have a Dream" speech, if he did nothing else, his history would have dissipated, right? Legacy is different than that, right? Legacy isn't grown by us. Legacy is grown by others. So although history dissipates over time when we're not there, legacy actually grows oftentimes when we're not there because others grow it. The analogy we use is a farmer. A farmer plows and scatters, but that doesn't guarantee growth. He needs environmental conditions. He needs the right sunlight, the right amount of water. We as when we're thinking about legacy, we're the farmer. We plow and scatter, plow and scatter, plow and scatter. That doesn't mean growth is going to occur. We need followers. We need other people to come along and water that. We planted in them. They need to water it. If they do, our legacy grows. That's why I get over the breakfast with parents all the time because they say my kids are my legacy. And I say, not necessarily, all right? They're your history. There was an event bound by time and there was a kid, but they may or may not be your legacy. Are they growing what you planted in them? I mean, maybe you didn't plant the right seeds, right? Maybe they don't want to be your legacy, right? I mean, it's a hard thing sometimes for parents to wrap their head around, but we need to. I mean, I'm not saying we need to. For me, I'm a legacy thinker all day long.
Yeah.
I just want to plow and scatter, plow and scatter, plow and scatter. That's why I wrote the book. Have I sold 5,000 copies? No, I have probably sold 500, right? I probably given away 2,000 books, but I wrote it because once it's written, it's always there, right? And I don't know. At some point, do I think it's going to explode? I do. I mean, God told me 29 years ago that I'm going to speak in front of stadiums of people. Have I done that yet? No, 29 years ago. Will it happen? Yeah, it will. When? I don't know. All I have to do is my job. My job is to develop my communication, take every opportunity I have, and he's the results guy, right? I'm the obedience guy. He's the results guy. So, I mean, look, I get super excited about this stuff. I'm trying to contain myself a little bit, but I mean, it's just, man, this is great stuff.
And it is great stuff, Brian. I love it all day long. I could have this conversation. It's I love it too for probably the same reason you love it. It's helpful to people. It's impactful. And I love what you said about legacy. I had someone share with me not that long ago that, and it ties right in with what you're saying. It's legacy is not what you leave behind necessarily, but it's what you leave in other people.
Absolutely.
And you took it a step further. And then what are those people going to do with what you left in them? Because they can then steward it well or not, right?
It is. It even gets more powerful than that because, again, I wasn't a farmer. My grandpa was, right? But he could plant corn, and in the middle of the corn could be beans. But he didn't plant beans. So how did the beans get in the corn, right? How the wind blew it, the birds blew it. That's legacy. Like I can plant seeds in my son, right? He can grow those seeds. But then he takes those seeds and he plants them in somebody else. I didn't have any direct contact with that person. Yet my legacy is growing in that individual. That's the power of legacy, right? I don't have to have direct impact on somebody. History, I do. For my history to have an impact, I got to have more of a tighter relationship. But legacy, I can plant them in somebody. They water it, they grow it. It keeps going. That's why we still, certainly Jesus, Abraham Lincoln's leadership, Martin Luther, right? That's all legacy stuff, right? And it keeps planting, it keeps going. It can go indefinitely. That's the power of legacy. It can grow forever.
Yeah.
Just wrap your head around that.
Yeah, and what's sad is that some people's idea of legacy is a name on a bridge, their name on a bridge, or their name on a park, or and that's not impacting lives for generations to come, like the names you just mentioned. Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus, and the list goes on. So it's just a great conversation. You've had a lot of change. I know we're talking earlier. 36 years of marriage, 25 moves. Different career changes. We have so many similarities. It's not even funny as you're talking. I'm like, oh, yep, that we got that in common. I mean, your wife, being willingly to go wherever and do whatever and make a lot of change and do it with a smile. That's my Nicole. So just a lot of similarities. But what have been some of the more difficult things? I know you mentioned even as a child that situation with your coach. We had a similar situation with our son trying out for a basketball team, and I saw the impact it had on him in his freshman year of high school. So I can relate with that. But was that one, or was there some other tough things you've been through?
Yeah, I think I think it was somewhat just innate. I mean, that setback actually was positive because it gave me this drive to say, look, if I think it's the right thing, if I feel like it's what God is directing me to do, I don't care who it is, I'm going to do it. Right. I mean, so I think throughout my life, it was somewhat intuitive. Now, there were times, and you marry good women for a reason. You know, I was the engineer, so I was in charge of all of the equipment, nuclear reactor, and all the equipment on a submarine. We had been in the shipyard. We came out. We weren't operating the ship very effectively. So I secured everybody's liberty, made everybody stay on the ship, import, which is generally a bad thing because if you're home, you know, their wives want them home, right? But I secured their liberty. The squadron commander, who was 2 ranks above me, came down, so everybody go home. I said, no, sir, I can't. I have to. My job is to get this ship so it can function. And as long as the captain hasn't told me, my captain hasn't told me that some people might keep going. And so we got in kind of a loud discussion over that. And when it came to my next selection board, he was on it, so I didn't scream. That was really hard, right? I started panicking, like, wait, I mean, I want to be a submarine captain. That's not going to happen, right? And my wife said, stop, right? Stop, right? It's over, right? You came in the Navy to be a submariner. They just told you you can't do that anymore, right? She said, we got to find the next thing, right? And so, again, now I see, man, what a blessing that was, right? I mean, the people I met when I moved to Michigan, ran a power plant there. You know, that's where I kind of ran into Dr. Miles Monroe and got to know him, who's a Bahamian pastor and great leader. You know, all these things. So I think it intuitively, we've all had setbacks. I mean, I invested 6 months of my life to try to get on the ballot to run for governor and couldn't, right? I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, I had so many people that I didn't realize were working against me. I didn't know they were working against me at the time, right? I mean, the political system is very strong and it's very bound together. And all those things. But I think you just have to, and it's Dr. Jason Selk. I mean, he's one of the guys. You got to just say, look, I've had this setback, I had this problem, and then you go, okay, what's next, right? What are the solutions? How do I get through this? How do I get around it? And so it's hard for me sometimes when people say what setbacks you've had. I go, I can't really remember because they were just kind of fleeting moments.
Right.
Because I'm a looking out the front windshield. A lot of people, we just term them the rearview mirror thinkers, right? They kind of drive their life staring in the rearview mirror. It's all about regret and all about all the problems.
It's a good way to crash.
Yeah, and they have this gigantic windshield in front of them. They never look at it, right? I mean, I think it just intuitively, I've never really glanced in the rearview mirror. I just said, look, it's the front windshield. That's where the future is. Let's just go that way. So, yeah, I've had setbacks, but I try, and they haven't been like, I've heard you talk. And my wife had enormous amounts of death in her family from the time she was little. I mean, it's just, she had a tough upbringing, right? I didn't have those things, right? But we all have setbacks, but I think I've just, for whatever reason, God has just given me the grace to say, look, just look out the front windshield, right? The future's there.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think that's the way we have to look at it. And I appreciate you bringing that out because there's probably far too many people just staring in that rearview mirror, and it's a dangerous place to just keep staring, especially when the car's still moving forward, life's still going on, right? Big windshield we should be looking out of. I like that. So that governor that one of my closest friends, Josh Clark, just a couple years ago ran for U.S. Senate out of Georgia, and I saw just a little bit of on the as a best friend going through that, just a little bit of on the inside what that's all about. And I know there's that had its own challenges for sure, I would imagine.
A lot of people would ask me, why are you running for governor? You've never run for political office. And it goes back to what we talked before. I felt I was best equipped to run for governor, right? I'm a communicator. I understand I'm a big picture thinker. I know how to connect dots for people. And I can explain things, I think, for people to wrap their head around. For example, I came right out of the chute saying, I'm running as a Republican and I'm running against the incumbent Republican governor, but I'm really running against the political system. And that political system is made up of both parties, right? And it's made up of, some companies and government employees, and it's that system. And that system is very bound together. And that system cares a lot about primary ballots. They care about the general election, but they care far more about primary ballots. If they can keep you off the ballot, you can't beat them. And so that's what they do. So they really form together. But our message was super good. For example, we took the Home Depot message about an inverted org chart. They call it the inverted pyramid, right? You take the org chart, you flip it upside down. Why do you do that? Org charts, just again, we're conditioned to look at the top of an org chart and say that's the most important. The CEO is the most important, and that goes down. Fine, then just flip it upside down. Home Depot does it. They put the CEO at the bottom. So when you look at the org chart, who's the most important? Store associates. right? So I said, look, we're going to do that in the state of Indiana. We're going to flip the org chart. We're going to put the governor at the bottom. We're going to put the people at the top. Why? So every day, every government employee that comes to work is going to see the people at the top and know why they're here. They're here for the people, right? And it's this concept of support. People said, but that won't do anything. I said, it'll do way more than you can imagine, because thinking drives our behaviors, right? Whatever happens up here eventually is coming out of here, right? And so it does enormous amounts of things. If you can change your thinking, you can permanently change your behavior. So the messages were resonating all over the place. The problem is people are scared of the system. So I'd say, can you help me? And they would say no. And so that's what we ran into. We ran into people that said, it's just too much risk for me. I love it, Brian. Love what you're saying. Think you do a terrific job. I think you hands down are better than anybody we have. I can't help you because I can't take the risk. That was the hard part for me. Like, it was hard for me because I'm pretty much a risk taker, right? So I don't think that way. And it was so hard for me because I'm like, but we can make a difference, right? I mean, it's about impact for me. It's about legacy for me.
Yeah.
And to see so many people go, I can't take the risk. I'm unwilling to take the risk. Man, broke my heart.
How did you deal with just the challenges of going even through that, and the thoughts, that the questions you must have had, and the fear of what other people thought? I mean, even though you're a strong person and you're going to do what you feel God's called you to do, and you're not going to, you're not going to let someone like the coach in high school, veer you off course from what the course God's called you to do. But still, I mean, did you not face fears and thoughts in your head and doubts? And how did you deal with all the stuff happening in your head to stay so focused and positive and on mission?
Yeah. Once I started to run, I didn't have that. Now, I moved back in 2015. So between 2015 and September of 2019, where I really went all in to go run, I tried to get out of it. I negotiated with God all day long. God, like, I don't really need to do this. Like, come on. I mean, I've taken most of the obedience. I came back to Indiana, right? I mean, I've done a lot of what you wanted me to do. And so it was all prior to that. Once I commit to something, the fear kind of just vanishes, right? And I'm laser focused on what we're trying to do. And it's just how I'm wired. I don't worry too much about what people think. That's not who I am. My wife is much more that way. What are they going to think? I'm like, that's not how I'm wired, right? I have a destination in mind. I got a vision. I know where I'm heading. It's kind of like, let's go there together, right? I'm giving you the opportunity to do something unique and different. Let's go together. But yeah, I mean, you have a lot of people, and it was a lot of high school friends, right? I mean, a lot of high school friends, who were the ones that were maybe the toughest, right? They're the ones that were saying, I can't believe you think this. I can't believe you think that, right? I mean, you're like, man, I thought we were friends, right?
Right.
I mean, but I mean, it never really, I think the fear for me came before, but kind of once I set my course, the fear tends to go away from me, and I just go full bore until the race is over.
I love it. Is there any advice you'd give to someone else who's going through a challenging time in their life?
I think we just have to figure out how not to dwell on it, right? I mean, I think you think about it for as short a period of time as you can, and then you say, okay, how do I get through it? How do I get around it? How do I get over it, right? What are the solutions? It's not that, grief isn't real and those emotions, right? You have to deal with those things. So deal with them. But then I think it's about lift up your head. I think a lot of us kind of walk through life looking down and about, a foot and a half in front of us, right?
Yeah.
And then we lift our head up and we go, oh, wow, like that's what it looks like, right? And so I think a lot of times when we have a burden or we have it, right, it weighs us down. And so the head comes down and that's all we see. And if we can just get the head back up again, right? If we can just look down the road, we can look at that front windshield and go, oh, wow, like there is a lot of things out there that I can still do. I can get through this, right? And then we just go. You just have to go. I did inspections on aircraft carriers, right? And an aircraft carrier, until it's moving, you just can't turn it, right? And so get your shit moving, right? Get going. Once you're going, then you can turn, right? But sometimes we just are so wrapped up in the disappointment, or so wrapped up in the grief, or so wrapped up in kind of the fear that we just can't get moving, right? And yeah. I'm a firm believer of get moving, and God will kind of he'll knock you back into play if you get out of the line, right? Just get moving so we can do that.
I love it, man. We're too much alike, Brian. Too much alike. So, what if you could go back in time? Is there? I mean, I know the answer. There's a lot of stuff we'd like to give, advice we'd like to give our younger self. But what is one of those pieces of advice if you had to choose one of the top you wish you knew younger, sooner?
I think when I was a kid, I thought I could do anything, right? I mean, I grew up in Indiana, so it was basketball. It was Bobby Knight, right? I mean, I was an athlete. I I wasn't a great athlete, but I just outworked everybody, right? So I thought I could conquer anything, quarterback of the football team, I thought I could conquer anything. I think I would just tell my younger self, um, you're not going to win everything you do. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? We're just not going to win every time, right? I mean, it's just, I wish we could, right? When I was a kid, I thought I could. I thought I could win everything. And as an adult, I recognize the outcome shouldn't really be the focus, right? There's a destination, and we should have a destination in mind, and we should be going that direction. But what really happens in the end? I mean, we just don't always control that. There's so many factors, but just keep going, right? And then when you get there, and then you go to the next one, and this next one, and the next one. So I think I would just have told my younger self, look, you're going to lose some, right? It's okay, right? You're not going to win them all.
Yeah, I love it. Do you have just some kind of 30-second quick questions as we start to wind this down? Do you have a favorite success quote maybe that you'd be willing to share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, this Dr. Miles Monroe is really had an impact on me. He was just a terrific leader. Wrote 50 books or something like that. But he said, purpose doesn't make life easy; it makes life possible. And I think I would maybe change that slightly, or I maybe would add that and say, being in the center of God's will isn't the safest place to be; it's the only place to be, right? And I think that's kind of what he's saying, right? Just because I know what I'm supposed to do and why God put me on planet Earth does not make it easy, but it makes living life what life is supposed to be. It makes life possible, right? And there's so much fulfillment. Why? John 17:4, because I get to glorify God. Every step I take to get a little bit closer to the person God created me to be is another chance I have to glorify God. And so that's where the fulfillment comes from. I mean, look, I told you we decimated our savings. I mean, I'm almost 58, right? I mean, people are thinking about retirement. Of course, I tell my wife I'm never retiring, but I it's just what it is, right? I mean, right? We followed God. Some things didn't work out exactly we wanted to. COVID hit, right? I mean, I can't always handle that outcome, right? But because I know my purpose, man, life is possible, right? And we're living life to the fullest, the best we can. And we bought a house in North Carolina. We didn't have any money. God said, buy the house because, my youngest son's divorced and he's in the Marine Corps, flies KC-130s for the Marines, 2 kids, and he said, you need to be down there more because you need to have an impact on those kids. They're 9 and 7. And so I said, God, we have no money. He said, yeah, but I have all the money, right? I have all the money, right? I own all the resources. So what are you worried about, right? So we just kind of go, right? I mean, my wife, there are days she goes, man, is this really right? We just kind of keep going, right? Strap in and keep going, right?
I love it. Walking by faith and doing your part. I love that so much. What is one habit, Brian, that's helped you become successful?
Well, I mean, I think spending time with God certainly in the morning matters, but I think lately, and it's probably been a couple of years, is 10 minutes of yoga in the morning. It may sound funny, but I'm kind of like a 2x4, right? I mean, my hamstrings are really about as tight, and it's really made my physical look. The physical body is how we deliver our purpose, right? I mean,
right.
we need this body to do that. If the body can't function, I can't do that, right? So just that 10 minutes of stretching, that 10 minutes of twisting, that 10 minutes of just loosening up in the morning, and I do it, I do some devotions, and right after that, I try to get right into the 10 minutes of yoga. Probably been doing it 2 years, and I really don't miss much time. My wife is a morning and evening yoga. I'm kind of just a morning person, but really, it sounds funny, and sometimes I don't want to tell people because it sounds a little silly, but really it's radically changed my physical life, right? I mean, it really has kept me, I think flexibility as you get older is really hampers a lot of what you do. You twist funny and now you're out for 2 weeks and you screwed your back up. I just don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, inflexibility is what makes you feel old. Flexibility makes, keeps you feeling and acting and walking and moving young. So I love it. Love it so much. I guess for you, I should have asked, what is one habit that's helped you be great instead of successful? Sorry, I didn't frame that properly, Brian. Right. Thanks for working with me. Thanks for tracking with me. I appreciate that. Hey, what's one of the best pieces of advice over the years that somebody has given you that you can pass along to us?
Yeah, again, maybe a little different. It came from my dad. So my dad taught college physics for 33 years. I was probably 14, got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and the kitchen light was on. If you're 14 and the kitchen light's on, you think somebody's eating, right? So I went to the kitchen and my dad was studying, okay? Teaches physics. Physics doesn't really change that much. And I said, what are you doing? He said, studying. I'm like, well, that was obvious. But I said, why are you studying? He said, because if I don't know a topic from a 360-degree perspective, I'll miss somebody because everyone learns differently. I can't get that out of my head. It comes up.
Wow.
I always use it in every seminar. So I work really hard to be this constant learner, right? Because I'm always thinking about, yeah, I know it from this way, but what about from this side and from this side, from this side, from this side? So I'm always trying to understand. That's why I study leadership so hard and communication so hard, because I get it, right? But if I'm explaining to somebody that maybe has never thought about leadership, I got to take a different approach. I'm talking to some apprentices within our organization, early 20s, and I'm teaching them the same stuff I teach to a CEO, right? It's the same material, but I got to come at it a little differently. They don't have the same life experiences, right? So that 360-degree concept, I think, it's been a huge, huge impact on my life.
So good. That is really good. Some great wisdom from your dad. Now, we know we've talked a little bit about climbing down, your book, Climbing Down, helping how leaders descend to their destiny, which I'm excited to get to read, by the way, Brian. In addition to that, what is one book you might recommend for the Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mentioned him a little bit, but Jason Selk is a sports psychologist. He helped the Cardinals, I think, when they were winning the World Series is between 2006 and 11, somewhere in there. But he wrote a book called Relentless Solutions Focused. And he really teaches you in that book how to get through challenges. How do I get through those things? And he says 60 seconds or less. When you have a challenge or a problem, you think about it for 60 seconds, and then you start thinking about solutions. I tried this with my oldest son, who tends to be, we're all wired for negativity, but he tends to maybe be a little more negative. He called me one time when I was in California. He said, I'm locked out of your condo in Indiana. He said, it always happens to me. I don't know what I did. It always happens to me. I'm thinking, relentless solutions focus. So I let him do that for about 30 seconds. And I said, okay, so what's your options? We can call a locksmith. And I said, so what are, and so he goes, you know what? Hold on, I'll call you back. Calls back in about 5 minutes, says, okay, I'm in. I'm like, how'd you get in? He's like, well, you don't really want to know, but I broke in, right? But again, it was that fast, right? I mean, it's that fast. So it really does work. I use it all the time in my business. When we get in this thing like, oh, what was us, right? Okay, that's fine. We're done. Now, what solutions? What are those solutions, right? And it's not solution singular, it's solutions. I say all the time, there's one destination, but multiple pathways. There's not one. If I'm in Indiana, I'm going to Disney World in Florida, one destination, but I can get there a bunch of different ways. So sometimes we lock in on one destination, one pathway. That's 100% not true. It's one destination, multiple pathways, solutions, relentless solutions focused. You can find the solutions, don't dwell on the problem.
Good word. What excites you most, or what is one or more things right now, currently, when you think about the future, Brian, that's exciting you?
I think about impacting the younger generation. That's just,
yeah,
to try to help them connect with who they are, this concept of greatness, to tap into some leadership, anytime I have a chance to go talk to that, to younger folks. I know some people look at the younger generation and fret, right? I look at the younger generation, I say, man, what, the opportunity that is there, right? We just have to tap into it, right? We can't give up, right? We just have to tap into it. So I just think, I'm excited about what God is going to do. I'm excited about potential and people connecting to their potential and then delivering it for the betterment of humanity. It doesn't do me any good, right? Might as well give it away, right? To keep it for myself is pointless. So I'm excited about the future just simply because I think this younger generation has tons of upside. We just got to tap in.
I love that. We need more of that perspective. What is the best way for our listeners to connect with you and follow along on your continued journey, Brian? Maybe get your book as well. Any way they can contact you?
Yep. The website is deployment.com. Books you can get kind of anywhere you buy books, right? Amazon or any of those places. And I can, certainly need, I'll send you one, Alan. So I'll get your address, or you want me to send it to someone, just send you one.
Appreciate that.
So employment2deployment.com is one. Social media and me have had this kind of distant relationship. LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably where I would spend most of my time. But really, employment2deployment.com is the best one.
Okay. We'll include that in the show notes below, so it's easy for our listeners to hop on your website there and check that all out. Brian, this has been phenomenal. It's been a ton of value for me and all of our listeners, no doubt. I'm going to give you the last word. Any closing comment you might want to share with our listeners today on the way out?
Greatness is inside of us, right? Greatness is inside of us. We have to believe it, right? We got to discover it. We got to develop it. We got to deliver it. So don't let your circumstances, it's not your environment. It's not, it's in here, right? You have it inside of you. You didn't put it in there. The great designer put it in there. But if you can find it, you can develop and you can deliver it, there's fulfillment at the end of that.
I love it. What a great word to go out on, Brian. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
If you love this podcast, grab some of Alan's free resources on his website at alanblain.com, spelled ALLANBLAIN.com. You can also find links to Alan's Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok there in his contact page. Lastly, if you can leave a 5-star review for us on your favorite podcast app, that will get these messages out to more people and it will really mean the world to us. Thanks in advance and make it a great day.